One of the 8 dangers that's been getting my attention recently is the one with the title, The Chain of Miserliness. And until the pandemic, this verse hasn't been bothering me, but it's bothering me a lot now. So the verse reads, binding embodied beings in the unbearable prison of psychic existence with no freedom. It locks them in craving's tight embrace, the chain of miserliness. Please protect us from this danger. So that's a pretty loaded verse. And of course, ignorance is the root of cyclic existence. But in this very beautiful book, I hope you have a copy, How to Free Your Mind by Venerable Children, she writes, yes, ignorance is a big deal, but what keeps us locked in suffering from one lifetime to the next is craving. And it's in cahoots with miserliness, the mind that clings to our possessions and we can't bear to part with them. And then she goes on to say, we like to think of ourselves as generous people. I do. Do you? I do. And then she says, in her great wisdom, however, when we look at our behavior, there's much room for improvement. For example, flies across the country, ends up in my mailbox. I know what this is. It's the stimulus check. Yes, it has my name on it. It's mine. It's mine. This is all mine. Every single penny of this is mine. Grasping, clinging. Can't get my fist to let go of this stimulus check. So this is pertinent if you live in this country, but it's pertinent around the world where you get something, maybe a wage, maybe an inheritance, something, it comes and it's mine. So what would Arya Tara say? I wish I could hear what she's saying. I'm talking to her a lot, and she's talking to all of us a lot. But my obscured mind can't hear it. And if I could hear it, I'd be too stupid to get it. I'm sure of it. So what would she say? Well, at first, this is my thought. She would say, well, what are you going to do with that? It really depends on each person's situation, totally. And we're all in different situations. And this check has been given to people in the country who have a green card, who are permanent residents, who are citizens. And then there's everybody else, right, who doesn't get one. So for those of us in the room, I'm going to speak on your behalf, who have enough, and we have enough. And there's many people, I'm thinking online, who have enough. There's one point of view that we'll take just for a few moments. And in this very beautiful book, How to Free Your Mind, Venerable writes, fear often lies behind our excuses about how we can't part with a single penny of that check. Fear. And what's that based on? Well, we falsely believe that money and possessions will bring us security and cyclic existence. Now, as practicing Buddhists, we go, I know that. I know that. Do I know that? So, in fact, our attachment keeps us bound in this prison of dissatisfaction. We constantly crave more and better, and we're never satisfied with what we have. Stinginess, she writes, is painful. It is, isn't it? It's very painful. And when it arises in our mind, we're locked in this tight embrace. It imprisons us. And when we recognize the faults of miserliness, we'll have the courage to let it go. But we have to recognize the faults. And we want to be happy. And so miserliness impedes our desire to be happy. It impedes our spiritual progress. It turns us into hypocrites and perpetuates our dissatisfaction. So she says that non-clinging and generosity are the antidotes to miserliness. And with non-clinging, we eventually don't conceive of material possessions as reliable sources of happiness or as the meaning of success. And then when we get more balanced in ourselves with that, we discover contentment, a rare commodity in our materialistic society. And then the sentence I've bolded here is, contentment allows us to cultivate the love that wishes others to have happiness in its causes, and then we can take delight in giving. Okay, so that's, the approach for people who have enough. But the reality of the situation in this country right now and around the world is this, and this is a few paragraphs from a New York Times article written by Connor Doherty. And he writes this: as the pandemic enters its second year, millions of renters are struggling with the loss of income and with the insecurity of not knowing how long they'll have a home. Their savings depleted, they're running up credit card debt to make the rent, or accruing months of overdue payments. Families are moving in together, offsetting the cost of housing by finding others to share it. Surveys show that families are increasingly pessimistic about making their next month's rent and are cutting back on food and other essentials to pay bills. Now, how do you cut back on food when you've got kids or elderly parents, or you're all living together in a house and you're cutting back on food? He cites a story of a California woman, a 47-year-old mother of 3. Before the pandemic, she cleaned schools and offices, and then she was laid off, of course. She's got 3 kids. She's months behind in the $1,300 rent for her 1-bedroom apartment. She recently signed a document with her landlord stating that while California law prohibited her eviction for now, she still owes a $3,900 balance, and it'll rise to $5,200 with the February rent. And she's got 3 kids. She's going into debt to buy food. So what would Tara say to people in this situation? And there's people in far worse situations too than this. What would she say? So again, I turned to volume 5, the Library of Wisdom and Compassion, and His Holiness and Venerable Right. On a practical level, we still have to take care of our body and mind. We're the only one who can do that, and we need to preserve our precious human life for the sake of others. Looking out for our own well-being at the expense of others is selfish, yet caring for our health and safety as one person among many is a valid concern. What would Tara say? Keep the money. Get some food. Don't beat yourself up. Be generous later on. And then I happened to mention to Venerable Children, she's in my office, about this topic and the checks coming. And so she said, take a look in Precious Garland, Nagarjuna. He has many, many chapters where he's talking to a king, of course, but kings have influence. And he gives some beautiful advice that is not just meant for a king, but we can all gain insight from this advice. So I'm going to pull out a few of the key points from this book. And this book, the commentary is by Khenser Jampa Tegchog, and Venerable Chödrön is the editor. So in the commentary, Khenser Jampa Tegchog writes, one reason the Buddha prescribed generosity as an initial practice is that it's quite easy. All religions teach generosity, and secular people too admire those who share their wealth. The Buddha made giving possessions and wealth an essential practice for lay followers, while monastics are encouraged to share what they have, and their principal practice is giving the Dharma. Bodhisattvas continually think about how wonderful it would be to find somebody to give to, and when they hear the words, "Please give me something," this fills them with joy far greater than the joy that here and solitary realizers experience abiding in their personal peace. Giving people whatever they need or want, jewelry, clothes, perfumes, garlands, food, drink, medicine, shelter, and more, give them things that are in excellent condition, not faded, old, or torn. It's important to give without thinking that we will become well known for being rich and generous. Watch your motivation and make sure it's always compassionate. That's very good advice. Nagarjuna goes on, there's no greater act than generosity, than to grant to the extremely unfortunate who are bereft of some aspect of the Dharma the happy chance to receive teachings on it. Out of your compassion, always care for the ill, the homeless, those afflicted by suffering, the downtrodden, the unfortunate. Respectfully apply yourself to abiding to them. With compassion, care for those who are sick so they might quickly recover. Be a protector for the homeless who have no one to turn to and a place where they feel safe. Reach out to those stricken with suffering so that they may be free of their suffering. Pay special attention to the lower castes. Well, of course, this is ancient India, but we've got the caste system in here. It exists everywhere. And those with low social standing who have particular problems. Attend to the problems of the poor. Tend to the suffering of all these people with compassion, respect, and joy. Do not be condescending with helping others, but help them as you'd help yourself. There's many, many verses. Please go to this book. I'm skipping a lot of them right now just because I don't want this to be too long. Nagarjuna repeatedly encourages us to be generous. Chandrakirti also praises generosity in the supplement, saying that so much human misery is due to not having the requisites for life. We're seeing this now. Food, clothing, shelter, medicine. Conversely, when people have what they need, suffering is diminished or eliminated. Thus, for those of us who aspire to be bodhisattvas who benefit the world, it's good to start with practicing generosity to those in need. Now, our bargaining mind, I don't know if you have a bargaining mind, but I have a bargaining mind in moments. Then Nagarjuna gives us a really great argument that's going to really get your attention, I think. If you have the habit of frequently being generous to people, giving a lot to people, there is the likelihood that emanations of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are among those who receive your gifts. Having received your offering, they make dedication prayers for your benefit. By the combined power of your generosity and the Bodhisattva's prayers and dedications, the imprint of potential for liberation is placed on your mind stream. Milarepa said that a person giving a little food or other requisites to a great meditator could augur their simultaneous awakening. This occurs because the donor actively provides the conditions for the meditator to gain realizations of the path, and the meditator makes special dedication prayers for the donor's benefit. So, great advice. We don't know who's who here. I sure don't. But let's give as if everyone was that kind of being. There's a very beautiful story from Volume 2 in Geshe Sopa's Steps on the Path to Awakening. Many people here are familiar with this, but it just touches my heart. And so if you're in the position of having not much, and let's face it, right now at the Abbey we have enough. That could change in a heartbeat. And throughout life, we see situations where we have enough, and then we don't. We have enough, and we don't. So this is an uplifting story. If you're in this situation right now that's temporary, where you don't have enough, and, use that money. It's the story from the Sutra of the Wise and Foolish that tells of a child named Golden Gem. This baby was born with his fist tightly closed, and when his parents opened his fingers, they found a golden coin. No matter how many times they took the coin from his hand, another one would appear. Amazed by this miraculous event, the family went to the Buddha and asked what it meant. The Buddha explained that many millions of years earlier, at the time of the previous Buddha, Kasyapa, a rich and noble family invited the Buddha and his followers to their home, where they wished to honor him with offerings. Living nearby was a young boy from a poor family who had nothing to offer. Nothing. Every day he walked into the hills to gather a small amount of firewood to sell in the market, and from that hard work he earned a meager living. When the poor boy heard that this noble family had invited the Buddha, he gathered up his meager savings and went off to watch the grand event. Clutching a few pennies in his little hand, the boy thought, "I'm just a poor woodcutter. It's because I did not create sufficient merit in the past that I am so terribly poor, and now I have nothing to offer." The people in this great family have such wealth, and they're able to invite the Buddha and all his followers, and by their generosity, they are creating great meritorious karma. How wonderful it is that they have obtained this precious opportunity. This is the mind of a boy. Feeling pleased in this way, He's pleased to see these people with this opportunity. He rejoiced in their merits. And with that attitude, he offered his hard-earned pennies to the Buddha. The Buddha accepted his offering with a smile. As a result of that act of generosity toward the Buddha, together with his rejoicing in the virtue of others, that woodcutter was born into human rebirth for many, many subsequent lives. And in all of those lives, he was born with a golden coin in his hand and lived a life of wealth. The woodcutter's good karma was still not exhausted, for once again in the present life, he was born as this baby with a gold coin in his hand. When the woodcutter made his gift, he also offered a special dedication prayer in which he expressed powerful faith in the Buddha and respect for his disciples, and he rejoiced in all the merits they were creating. As a result of that heartfelt prayer, when the boy with the golden coin in his hand got older, he was ordained as a Buddhist monk and eventually attained the highest spiritual results. So when the check shows up, rejoice. But rejoice and have gratitude for the taxpayers who funded that check. And see what part of the check you can actually part with. Maybe it's pennies. Maybe right now it's not a single cent. But make heartfelt aspirations to be able to give in the near future. Engage in purification activities, create merit, rejoice in those who are being able to engage in virtuous activities right now. And then when you have the chance, let's not forget all of these people who are still in the front line, the doctors, the nurses. The clapping and singing on balconies has diminished or stopped. And they're continuing day after day in an exhausting, demoralizing often situation where I think some people are just feeling despair. And then let's not forget the people who are in old folks' home facilities, can't see their families. So if even making an offering right now is really not possible, and it might not be, how about a card? Send some homemade cards to an old folks' home facility. So this has been a bit long, sorry about that. But in closing, I'd like to come back to some words from Venerable Children in How to Free Your Mind. Giving with an open heart brings us joy and directly benefits others. Sharing is a source of our continued existence as a species. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, it is not survival of the fittest, but survival of those who cooperate the most that makes a species prosper. None of us exist independently. We have to depend on others simply to stay alive. Thus, helping others and sharing wealth benefits both self and others. Generosity makes us happy now, enables our species to continue to prosper, and creates positive karma that brings us prosperity in the future. So let's give generously with a mind of rejoicing.